Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to breakfast in the class, dedicated today in the Refuah Shlema of Bahia Rivka Bat Esther by her grandchildren, Gail and Sonny Haddad, as well in loving memory of Mo Maleh, Alav Shalom, Lilun Shmat Moshe Ben Jamile, sponsored by his son Jack Maleh, in loving memory of Joseph Zuzu Dana, Lilun Shmat Yosef Ben Simcha, Alav Shalom, sponsored by his granddaughter Ruth Saidian, and as well the week of Kol Bru dedicated loving memory of Sammy Sayed, Lilun Nishmat Shlomo Ben Rivka, sponsored by his son Isaac Sayed, and Lilun Nishmat Moshe Ben Shimon Simantov, dedicated by Simon Simantov, Lilun Nishmato. Rabotai, the pasuk tells us something very interesting. It tells us, Ko tomar lebet Yaakov, so should you speak to the house of Jacob, and so shall you daber, and that's how you shall speak the Bnei Israel. So two words for speech. One, tomar, means to say, and to daber means to speak. Traditionally, the word tomar, yomar, amar is a softer form of speech. Dibur is a harsher form of speech. Our rabbis teach us, who is Tomar? Tomar is the way you speak to the women. The women, when you speak to them, you don't yell or scream at them. You speak nicely, calmly, softly. And that's how the message penetrates, and that's how the message gets through. When you speak to men that have egos and testosterone, and the only thing they respect is his strength, so then you speak harshly, and the men receive it as well. That's the traditional teaching. But there's a question that's asked by the Chachamim, why is it that Kol Tomar, that speaking to the women actually comes first? Is this the Torah's equivalent of ladies first? What are we saying over here? Why is the communication Kol Tomar lebeit Israel come before Kol Daber? Why does that take precedence? Rabotai, there's something here that I think is very, very powerful. And I think that this is actually a point of reference for understanding the influence that women have on the entirety of Judaism, but specifically in building the home. You know, our rabbis say, quoting the pasuk, "Chukmot nashim banta beta," the wisdom of women is what builds the house. Banta beta, builds the house. And the Gemara says, what is that referring to, that pasuk? That pasuk is referring to a woman who was the wife of On ben Pelet. Right? Why? Because she, using her wisdom, helped her husband not get involved in the fight between Korach and his followers. And through that process, she built a home while everyone else was destroyed. In the fighting of Korach, everyone else that was involved got obliterated. On ben Pelet's wife was capable, Mrs. Ben Pelet was capable of saving her husband and all future generations with her wisdom by helping him avoid getting involved in that machloket. So we see this concept of banta beta, but it's interesting to note. It doesn't say chokhmat nashim, it says chokhmot, indicating that there are multiple wisdoms that a woman has, which are that which build the house that she's trying to set up, her home, her children, her husband, her eternity. And Rabotai, it is that idea that I'd like to focus with you today upon. We know that our Gemara tells us that a woman is blessed with something called Binah Yitro. More than a man has Binah, has wisdom, a woman has wisdom. But it specifies a specific type of wisdom in which women are far superior to men. And what is that? The Gemara explains the wisdom of Binah. Now again, we don't have time to go into each of the various wisdoms and what they mean today in this class, but for the sake of understanding over here, it's important to recognize that there's different types of wisdom. One type of wisdom is a hitstabrut, a gathering in of many different facts, knowing many different things about geography, about this or about that. Random tidbits. Men actually have a proclivity for understanding or trying to understand random different curiosities, women's wisdom is not necessarily about breadth, it's about depth. Lehavin davar mitoch davar. To understand something from something else. It's why men and women are constantly getting into fights with each other. Because the woman expects the husband to understand. I said this, didn't you understand that meant that I was upset? That word, davar mitoch davar, that's the point. Didn't you understand from this something else? And the guy's like, if you just meant it, why didn't you say it? That eternal fight between husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends, is at the root of the different way that we process information, of lehavin davar mitoch davar. And a woman has Binah Yitro. So let me explain a little bit what this means and why it wasn't necessary a harsher speech with women that in the way that it was with men. With a woman, if you're saying something, she'll be able to understand the underlying concept. If you teach Torah to a woman, so all you need is to say the idea, she'll get the idea behind the idea. If I'm telling you about being honest in business, she'll understand that means all of these things. What's a guy going to say? He'll show you the contract. It doesn't say that I can't do this. Right? That doesn't say that's a male process. And then we'll get into a fight over what it says. Right? You understand? That's why you needed dibur with the man, because you need to penetrate, so to speak. You need to have the halakha, the law, the idea, the spirit of the law needs to penetrate that initial external shell all the way down so the person understands exactly what you're trying to say. With women, it wasn't necessary. They understand lehavin davar mitoch davar. I want to share with you an example of what it means lehavin davar mitoch davar, the idea of chokhmot nashim, the wisdoms of women. There were two young men that moved from the city of Radin, the city of the Chafetz Chaim. They moved to America. America! The streets are paved with gold, the land of opportunity. In Yiddish they call it the golden Medina, right? The golden country. Everyone was coming here with their rucksacks full of hopes and dreams. They came and they moved their families because they heard that in America is the land of opportunity. What everyone neglected to mention was that opportunity was a job that you had to attend 7 days a week. So there's a lot of opportunities for people that were not Shomei Shabbat. So in the lead up to World War I, these two families, the beginning of the 1900s, they moved to America and they got a job, and they found out on Friday morning that their job was also on Saturday. So they came to speak to the boss. The boss said to them, "Hey, how do you mind? This is a country with freedom of religion, but we also have freedom to fire you for that religion." Right? Sometimes you realize this freedom of religion thing it's not so free, It's the freedom of speech. It's not so free. We could take away your Twitter account. Right? There's lots of examples of this, okay? Rabotai, something which I think is magnificent. So what happens? Every Shabbat, they lose their job. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, it takes them till they find a new job. By Friday already, they're out on their feet, their bums again. For 2 years, they stayed faithful to Shabbat. 2 years of not knowing what's going to be next week. 2 years of uncertainty. 2 years of crying children. 2 years of wives, of worried wives. Rabotai is nightmare. But they gave everything their moser nefesh for Shabbat. After 2 years, finally, the two of them together find a job in a munitions factory. In America, there was I think it was in New Jersey actually, there was a factory that was producing weapons, for the army. And the boss said to them, "Look, I know you don't want to work on Saturday. As far as I'm concerned, I just need to know that you're producing your weekly quota. If you're producing it on Sunday or Saturday or Thursday, or you stay all night, I don't care. So long as you're producing the quota that you need to produce, I'm good. Come whenever you want." They were overjoyed. Rabotai, 8 months, they had a job, they had job security, they could sleep at night. They were not worried. 8 months into this job, World War I breaks out. And the American companies are ordered by the army to ramp up production. The boss comes to them that week and he says, listen, I know we have an arrangement already for 8 months. He says, but unfortunately now war is war. And in times of war, we need to step up our production. And he says, and now I need you here like everybody else every single day, producing the maximum that you can. If I can't have somebody at that station producing 7 days a week, I'm losing 1 day of production. Although you're producing the same as you would produce, but I'll get somebody else in who's producing the same as you're doing on the 6 days, but he'll also add a 7th day. And I need to max out everything that I can produce. It's war. They go home. Each of them sitting there, perturbed, thinking, wondering, sweating. Friday morning comes. One of the men, these young family leaders from Radin, stays strong. Shabbat, chalas. That's it. Today's my last day of work. Second guy, unfortunately, he couldn't bear with it. He couldn't deal with it anymore. I have to feed my family. My kids are going to go hungry. They didn't have programs then that that you could make more on unemployment than on being employed. So he says, to his wife, he says, listen, tomorrow morning I have to get up early. He says, don't wait for me to come home from shul, because I'm not going to be back until Saturday night. She says, what do you mean? He says, the boss told us that if we don't come in tomorrow, we lost our jobs. I can't do this to you. I can't do this to the family. He says, and I finally decided that this is pikuach nefesh, and for pikuach nefesh, you have to break even Shabbat. Pikuach nefesh, my children need to eat, my wife, I can't. The wife doesn't say anything. Husband goes to sleep. 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever his alarm goes off. Hadda gets up, he goes to the closet to get dressed. He has no clothes. He looks in the other room, maybe it's there in the laundry. No shirts, no pants, no socks, no shoes. He searches the house until he realizes his wife. His clothing didn't just all take a vacation, right? So he wakes up his wife. He says, "Ma ando pants, ma ando shirt. Where's my shirt, my pants, my socks, my shoes?" His wife says to him, "Rohi, if it's pikuach nefesh, you should really go in your pajamas and in your slippers, right? If it's that important." Hadda understands. He's not humiliating himself to go to work in pajamas. But if he's not going to work in pajamas, right, then he shouldn't go to work on Shabbat. And he doesn't go. Chochmot Nashim means that there's multiple levels of wisdom. One wisdom is in understanding the situation as it is. But the second level of wisdom is being able to intercede in a way which doesn't make the problem worse. She doesn't argue with him the night before, doesn't yell and scream at him, doesn't tell him how disappointed she is, doesn't tell him, did I marry a Mechalel Shabbat? She doesn't destroy him. All she does is places in front of him something which sharpens the truth to such a level. Is it really Pikuach Nefesh? Is that really how you feel about it? So then just go in your underwear. Oh, so it's not. If it's not, then it's not. But she doesn't have to argue with him. She doesn't have to yell at him. Doesn't have to scream at him. That's the Binah of a woman. Rabutai, this beautiful Binah is why when Moshe is communicating the ideas of Torah, Ko Tomar Lebet Israel. This is how he tells Bet Yaakov. He tells the house of Jacob. We said earlier that it is that Binah which builds Banta Beta. The wife, the Jewish woman, is called the home. Not because she stays at home. Throughout many, today, progressive women think that they're women that are working. You know what? That's not so progressive. For thousands of years, women have been working. You go back all the way in the Torah, we have examples. In the Nevi'im, we have examples of women that did things. They had jobs. That's not so progressive. The idea that you have to stay, that maybe is not so progressive, right? But that somebody did something. I mean, the Chafetz Chaim worked with his wife in the store, and then he left at a certain time. And his wife carried on. She ran the store. He studied. He became the rabbi. He led the people, but they worked together in the store up until a certain hour, and then he went to study and do his duties. And his wife kept the store open. We have many examples of this. So, Rabotai, the beauty of this, of a wife building the home, is in this sensitivity. A lot of times, a father, he gets very upset at his child because the child's not acting the way that they want. So he yells and he screams. He puts the fear of God in them. Right? Like we know in our parasha this week, it says, Kabed avicha v'et imecha. It puts avicha in honoring them first. But when it speaks later on about having awe and respect for your parents, it says, Ish imo ve'aviv tirau. His mother and his father, he should have fear. He should have respect for them. The Gemara says, why is it that when it talks about kabod, showing them honor and taking care of them, it puts the father first? And when it talks about having fear and respect, it puts the mother first? The Gemara says, because the Torah is commanding you on the thing that is less natural. So naturally, a person has more kavod, they want to take care of their mother more because the mother took care of them more. The mother was softer. They have more of a kavod for their mother than their father. So the pasuk says, Kabed avicha v'et imecha. That's the one I need to give you more of a push for. When it talks about having respect, having awe, fear of your parents, fear is the wrong word, it means awe. But a person naturally is maybe more in awe of their father, because their father lays down the law, or the belt, depending on what generation you came from. Right? You understand, Rabotai? This is a very important concept. So, the softness is what built the home. Borei Olam understood that Moshe, before you teach the men anything, let's make sure that the women have the instructions. If the women have the instructions, I have more faith that a good Jewish mother is going to produce a good Jewish kid than a good Jewish father producing a good Jewish kid. If the mother is weak in her Torah, in her mitzvot, in her Yirat Shamayim, it's much harder for the father to raise a good child. If the mother is strong, the Akeret Abayit, she's the foundation of the home. Rabotai, it's so important. I send this out to the singles that are listening to this, in finding the woman that you're looking to find. Make sure that she is someone that is going to be capable of producing Jewish children and grandchildren. That comes from her level of Yirat Shamayim, of her empathy, of her compassion. How is she? Is she going to teach the kids to be entitled, or is she going to teach the kids to be responsible? Is she going to teach the kids to be kind, or teach the kids to be elitist? Those midot that she has, they are the ones that are going to translate into your children, into your future generations. The same thing, Rabotai, I would say as well, for husbands to recognize and to keep their wives on a pedestal, to understand that the key to all of their future, of their family name, is in the kavod and the respect they give to their wife. Because if husbands disrespect their wives, then children disrespect their mothers. When you show your wife that you think that she's the most amazing person ever, then they'll learn from her positive character traits. If you present yourself as higher than her, then they think, mommy's a nobody. She just gave birth to us and gives us rice and amud. But I don't have to learn from her. I don't have to emulate her. So this is incredibly important. Our rabbis tell us, Rabbeinu Bahayeh points out something unbelievable. He says, look in the Torah. In the Torah you will find many examples of righteous people, of great scholars, of great leaders. But interestingly enough, when the Torah talks about great leaders and scholars, it doesn't tell us about how smart they were. When it talks about Noach, it says, Noach ish sadiq, tamim haya b'dorotav. It doesn't tell us that Noach had brains. Avraham italech lefanai veheye tamim. That's the description that we have of Avraham Avinu. Does it say anywhere? And Avraham's IQ haya gadol meod meod. Doesn't say that. It doesn't say Yaakov Avinu was a chess grandmaster. It says Yaakov was Ishtam. It says Moshe was Anav Mikol Adam. It doesn't say Moshe Nushas. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that Aharon had the pin test. That he looked at, had all the Gemara. He was able to put the pin through the Gemara and tell you where on each page the pin went through. It tells you that Aharon was Ohev Shalom, Rodef Shalom. You understand the point here? In our religion, the power of wisdom, Rabbeinu Bahayer writes magnificently. He writes that the importance of Chokhmah is the Yosher HaMidot, is the straightness of the way the person comports themselves and the way that they treat others. That's why it says, Sechel Tov Lechol Osehem. Great wisdom to all those who do it, who enact it. But it doesn't say Sechel Tov Lechol Lomdehem, to all those who learn it. The purpose of studying Torah is to be able to enact and to be able to fulfill its mitzvot and to stand up to the high barometer that it places for human capacity to be godlike, to be compassionate, Mahu Rachum, merciful, Chanun, gracious, Erech Apayim, long to anger. All of these things, part of the Torah. Rabotai, I think that's part of the reason why the Torah was teaching this to us. Now I'd like to share one last bit, and please don't misunderstand me and castigate me and throw rocks at me. Rabotai, there is a feminine side to every man. And I'm not talking over here about gender fluidity. I'm talking about the fact that men have a feminine side and females and women have a male side. This is not how you identify. It's not what I'm talking about. But the compassionate elements of a man are the feminine side, if you will, of him. And the male aspects of a woman might be those courageous aspects. Today, we say, this is how men act, and this is how women act. And that's what causes a lot of people who are feminists to get very offended. We don't mean that that's a man or a female. Those are traits that are called masculine or feminine. That doesn't mean that that is what a man is. It doesn't mean that is what a female is. You could have a woman who is much more brave or courageous or risk-taking than any man that you know. And vice versa, you could have. Those are people who perfected or who pushed further on those sides of their character, alongside the nature of the traits that they were born with. This is not only a statement that Moshe made to the males and the females of the Jewish people, but he spoke softly to the part of a human being that was able to hear a message said softly. And he spoke harshly to the part of a human being that needs something to be said harshly. Sometimes a person needs soft encouragement, and harsh words actually produce the exact opposite reaction. Think for a moment of a teenager. A teenager is in a moment of rebellion, right? If you try and come at a teenager with yelling and screaming, by dictating, by laying down the law, what does the teenager respond? By going the opposite, stronger in the opposite direction. At that stage, there's a requirement, a necessary response of tomar. But when a child, as an example, is maybe younger, and they've done something wrong, right? They may need, at that stage, a very strong guiding word at that point. A child does something that's dangerous. You don't come down and say, Rohi, a car travels at 52 miles an hour. The human body is made up of soft skin, tissue, and fragile bones. What do you think's going to happen, sweetheart, when a fast, hard-moving object made out of metal hits a soft The kid needs to hear, don't run in the street! Smack, even. The great experts in chinuch say that we don't smack children anymore. Except for something where the child is putting themselves in danger. Because there, the child doesn't need a soft word. There, the child needs something harsh. You have people who are in relationships, Rabotai, that sometimes they're in a damaging relationship. Not that you think it's damaging, but that everyone thinks it's damaging. Where the person in the relationship is manipulative or abusive, and they need to get out. But there's something called battered woman syndrome, where the woman gets so abused, physically, emotionally, that she can't leave. And she starts taking on the blame. It's not his fault that he hit me. It's my fault. I shouldn't have done this. The supper wasn't ready. It's called battered wife syndrome. She'll go back to it each time. He's not so bad. He gives me money for the food. Puts the kids through school. He's not so bad. People don't understand him the way I do. Speaking softly in a moment like that to this woman is not going to work. You need harsh words. Staging an intervention is what you might need. You might need everyone to literally, not figuratively, pull her out of the house. Take her to a place where she can get help, where she can be safe. Is this clear? Ko tomar, ko tedaber. The words of Torah require great wisdom in their application. Not in their understanding, but in the way that we communicate them to others. And ultimately, whether a house will survive or a house will collapse is going to depend on understanding the masculine and the feminine, the harsh and the soft, and the communication of those ideas in a way where the person can move forward and grow as opposed to be crushed. Could you imagine this husband came home and said, Rohi, tomorrow I'm going to work. And in the morning, he couldn't find his clothes. And he said, sweetie, where's my clothes? And instead of saying what she said to him, she said, you want to break Shabbat? I didn't marry a goy. Your clothing's in a suitcase on the front step of the house. If you leave, don't come back. Maybe he would not have gone to work because he'd have been a Jewish husband, a bit scared of his wife. Maybe. But Rabotai, that move, while gaining her, netting her, the Shabbat that she wanted, might have cost her the husband. Because in that moment, she's illustrating that her love is not unconditional. Understanding how to say what you need to say is everything. Moshe, tomar tedaber. Parents, tomar tedaber. Speak, say. Mention, yell. How are you going to say what you need to say is as important as what you actually say. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.